deg søvn. Hold av en plass til meg i din drøm. Og vær da ikke redd mens du sover, for natten skader ingen, og jeg lover. Jeg vil våke ved din side og vokte deg i natt. Hi, and welcome back to our reading of The Red Line by Marietta. So, this is chapter 18, The House Without a Gate, and in our last chapter, our protagonist, now in the body of Francesco Borri, is escaping Denmark as he was helping the Danish king as his alchemist, failing in his experiments. And chapter 18 is the final chapter in the first book of the book, the Prima Materia. So after this chapter is over, we go into the second book, which is The Crucible in the Fire. But first, chapter 18, The House Without a Gate. Now, I wanted to go to Turkey, or rather Homunculus did. I had plenty of money, for the king had given me gifts that could easily be converted to large amounts of ready cash. My destination was changed abruptly by an irritating incident. These were the days of the Nadasdy-Frangipan conspiracy, and its repercussions swept me up in Vienna. In those days, everybody was suspicious of everybody, especially foreign travelers, because so many diverse people had been involved in this tragic affair. Ardent patriots, dreamers, fanatics, and opportunists. I was mistaken for a courier of the conspirators and taken into Vienna under armed escort. When investigation revealed my identity, I was treated to a sour apology. Meanwhile, Homunculus made another of his master strokes. He told me about Count Zinzendorf, the Minister of Treasury, who was a secret believer in alchemy. I obtained an audience, and he took me into his service. Homunculus was pleased with this new arrangement, but I wasn't. I was beginning to abhor alchemical workshops and the repetition of barren experiments under the direction of an avaricious potentate and a monomaniacal phantom. I had had enough. Now I was becoming impatient and desperate. How could I get out of this trap? Death itself would not free me of Homunculus. I had to find another way. Meanwhile, Homunculus was watching me carefully. He knew what I was feeling, but it didn't worry him. He was sure of his power over me. I worked slowly and listlessly, and finally he was moved to remonstrate. When I resisted, he threatened me. "What will happen if I just quit?" I demanded bitterly. "You will obey me," he intoned. "I am stronger than that astral horde around you. You are my creation. Your entire intellect and concepts are mine. Mine! My hook is deep within you. You are my slave, and when this body of yours crumbles, I'll just jerk the line and have you forever." Then I fathomed the depths of my misery. Homunculus left me for a while after that, left me alone with my misery to bring me into submission. He wanted me to grasp the full force of my bondage. There was no return. I had pushed myself away from the shore of normalcy, and now I must either sink or swim in the dark river of mystery. It was while I was in this miserable and discouraged state of mind that the unexpected happened again and ruined all of Homunculus's calculations by redirecting my life. It was always this invisible, illogical factor that he denounced so bitterly, that tripped up his irrefutable genius. For Rome, which had been watching my activities for a long time, finally caught up with me in Vienna. Count von Zinzendorf fought for me for nearly a year, but the papal nuncio interceded and I was extradited to the Pope. I went to Rome under armed escort. I knew nothing good awaited me there, but I wasn't afraid. I was a broken old man and thoroughly miserable anyway. What was the threat of prison, torture, or death compared to the heavy shadow of Homunculus? I was locked in the Castel Sant'Angelo and left alone and unquestioned for some time. I had heard about the customs of the place, and I was prepared for a long and monotonous captivity. The forced idleness was much to my liking, though my solitude allowed the other world to become very real to me again. I spent weeks in a nightmarish dream whirlpool, surrounded by distorted faces, apocalyptic monsters, and images of passion. My desire to be rid of Homunculus loosened the dam I had constructed against them, and their onrushing dirty mass blocked the bridge between us. Only occasionally did the dark shape break through the astral foam, summoning and commanding. I was reluctant to perform the exercises that would strengthen our bond, so he began straining toward me quietly, ripping through the shell of senses that surrounded me. So I surrendered. By all means, let's continue the experiments, I told him, but where? I was a prisoner, and after my trial they might well kill me. He reassured me on the latter score, and soon I realized that he was not remaining inactive. The result was a visitor in the night. When he threw back his cowl, I saw he was a high-ranking church dignitary, and his name, when he gave it, was not unknown. He was considered the most skillful diplomat of the papal court, a man with a mind both cautious and curious. This man could cover himself verbally in every direction. His speeches dazzled the masses, but those who analyzed them realized he had used a lot of splendid words without telling them anything. He knew no personal loyalties, only conformity to what was demanded at the moment. He could wriggle around obstacles like an eel darting about in the dangerous waters of power politics. This cold, clever, and worthless man became my new patron. As I became aware of his inner motivations, I realized he was interested in me largely because a person of much higher standing than himself was, and the privileges I was given were otherwise unthinkable in that infamous prison. I was given a decent bed, good food, freedom of movement, and even a laboratory, a luxuriously equipped alchemical workshop. So I began again performing the familiar processes I had grown so tired of, automatically performing the duties Homunculus assigned. I blended various combinations of materials, fed the fire under the false womb, and knew there would be no conception. Still, this new patron and workshop were the path to my redemption from Homunculus. The event approached quietly as all great events begin. A drop of water forming with others to start a tidal wave. I was given a famulus to carry coal and water, rinse pots, sweep, and take care of the lamps. He had a 13-year-old daughter whom everyone considered retarded, but she was the apple of his eye. Her mother had died in childbirth. I frequently worked late into the night, and Alessandro had to remain available in case I needed him. When this happened, little Marietta brought him his dinner. She would creep in quietly as a mouse, and I didn't even know about her for a long time because Alessandro had to stay in the storage room while I was working. One night, it must have been after 10 o'clock, Marietta walked into the workshop. At first, I thought she was just curious, wanting to watch the fire shadows flicker on the walls as I worked over a spirit lamp evaporating water from 12 times washed sand. It was a while before I noticed her. She just stood quietly and watched me work. Alessandro had fallen asleep after a heavy supper, and I had simply forgotten to close the door. That was how she was able to walk in. Her gentle, childish voice interrupted me suddenly. "This is hell, isn't it, Signora Burgos?" Her hair was in dark braids going down to her shoulders, and the tight bodice of her long blue dress revealed she was frighteningly thin and underdeveloped. Her cheeks were hollow and old-looking, but her large blue eyes shone with an inner light. Hands clasped modestly in front of her, she waited for my answer. I was speechless with surprise. Something about her scared and touched me. I put down the crucible and turned the spirit lamp in her direction. Who in the world are you? How did you get in here?" I'm Marietta, Alessandro Combati's Marietta, you know, your servant." Oh, Alessandro's little daughter." "Yes, I came to bring him his supper. I've wanted to come in for a long time because I've got to talk to you, but my father won't let me. He's asleep now." I sat down and pulled her to me so the light shone on her peculiar face. She made no attempt to resist, but stood between my knees looking at me solemnly. Marietta. The name contracted my heart. It had been my mother's name, and the memory of it began to bleed within me like a reopened wound. This little girl didn't look at all like her. She only had the same name. Yet memories flooded my heart with sorrow and hopeless longing. "Yes," I said softly. "You're right, Marietta. This is hell. What did you want to tell me?" "I can't tell you here. It's a message. Since you came, it's been the strongest of my voices." "What voices?" "The ones I hear," she said quietly. "A Madonna made me promise to deliver a message to Signore Francesco Borri, now called Burgos, but not near hell. We would both get into trouble with the devil who guards his power over you." Just then, Alessandro's frightened face appeared in the door and he rushed in to jerk the girl away. "Marietta, I've told you not to forgive me, Signor. I swear to the Holy Virgin it won't happen again. My poor little girl is demented. She has no idea what she is doing." "Calm down, Alessandro. It's all right. I didn't know you had such a smart little daughter. We're getting along very well together. You can go on back to sleep," I added jokingly. I was shivering inside at the possibility that something would keep her from giving me that message so important it shook my whole being, for I heard my mother's whisper in it, felt her continued desire to help, to rescue me from the brimstone precipice over which I dangled. She had used the weak, pure body of little Marietta to speak to me. What tenacious, radiant love, ready to make any sacrifice to fight a way through to me. When Alessandro had left, I took the little girl's hand. "Let's go outside, Marietta. You'll have to tell me right now. You may not get another chance." Already the lamps were turning yellow and the workshop grew alarmingly cold, despite its hot furnaces. A beam of light was already stretching to the corner, and I felt the approach of the monster in my whole being. I jerked open the door to the yard. Marietta was trembling. I lifted her slight body and brought her mouth close to my ear. "Tell me now, child. Don't be afraid. The Madonna is watching over you." And Marietta whispered my mother's message. I sent the little girl home with Alessandro and returned to the workshop. My mother's gentle voice, wafted from beyond the grave, filled me with light and prayer, throwing a magic cloak around me to give me the strength to re-enter that silent room of red and black shadows where Homunculus waited for the reckoning in deadly anger. His hostile presence thickened and chilled the air. Terror tore into me with sharp talons, the terror that can crush a man who merely glimpses it. Homunculus was concentrating all his power and will to subdue me with his evil knowledge. The fires in the furnace darkened and spewed heavy smoke, and although the night was balmy outside, The heated workshop was covered in frost from deadly cold. The cold curled around me like a slippery reptile, clinging to my face, slipping inside my clothes, and attacking my bones. I felt the penetrating cold paralyzing me, dimming the flame of my mother's message. If that light were extinguished, I would be overcome with panic and lost. I knew I had to withstand it with the whole force of my faith and memory. I leaned forward over the table. My voice echoed sharply from the walls as I spoke to that infinite light beam that stretched toward the corner. I know who you are. You can't hurt me because I am not afraid of you. Suddenly, the shrill scream of a hurricane wailed through the chamber, and the glass ball on the spirit lamp broke with a resounding crack and scattered shards all over the floor. Crucibles reeled and bumped into each other on the shelves, tottering as though they wished to flee. A mass of soot in one of the furnaces exploded with a muffled thump, and I was covered in it. It blinded me, and I could taste the stuff in my mouth. I was exhausted and miserable, but I turned against my pursuer with the rage of the hunted animal. I know your real name. You are the house without a gate. I have nothing more to do with you. I dissolve the bond and deny the attraction. Leave me, Leviathan. Leave me forever. I command it. I bent forward and clutched the table. My loud, intense shouting had drained me physically. My knees began to buckle and I was sweating profusely. Slowly, I slipped to the floor. Gradually, I stopped shaking. Terror streamed through my nerves as I tried to recover. I don't know how long I stayed like that. When my shaking had finally calmed and tears had washed the soot from my eyes, I noticed a change in the workshop. My skin was being soothed by a warm, gentle atmosphere, and the naked flame of the spirit lamp blazed cheerfully. The furnace glowed. A lullaby of crickets was being wafted in through the windows out of the star-dusted night. In that moment, exhausted and filthy, I felt a brief moment of joy, such as I had never felt before. I knelt and mumbled incoherent thanks to God and my mother. Then I staggered up, leaned out the window, and blessed the crickets. I was free. What do I mean by that? Maybe someone who receives a last-minute pardon at the moment of execution would understand how I felt when the mystic curtain finally fell between me and Homunculus. Death itself is insignificant beside the unfathomable, hopeless misery of an eternity with Homunculus. Where there is death, there is ultimately resurrection and salvation. So the prison closed again on Homunculus, and he was alone with his barren monomania for another millennia. Then, I was so terrified, I couldn't even pity him. Today, I can. Rare moments like this imbue even the most miserable being with vivid memories and an inexhaustible hope that he may yet arrive at his goal. The taste of these moments never passes. They are like the little grains of dust in the oyster that mature amid agony and tears to form a pearl. It doesn't matter how many lifetimes it takes or how many names, memories, and human labels appear to be involved. It is then that conception occurs. Everything that happens from then on is protective shell, guardian, and enhancer, the alchemical furnace of that small but immense essence. I didn't have much time after my break with Homunculus. The great shock of the event hastened the death of the infamous Burhus. I didn't even have much strength for my daily walks on the ramparts. I was not permitted to leave the castle. Otherwise, I got whatever I wanted, including the privilege of receiving visitors. I didn't want to see anyone, though. Of course, many people were curious about my long and adventurous life. My patron frequently came to ask about my progress, and I didn't hesitate to tell him I had failed. I had no desire to lie anymore. He reproached me bitterly and expressed great dissatisfaction. Things might have gone ill with me if I had not at about that time succeeded in healing the intestinal problems of an even higher potentate by prescribing a special diet. Nobody bothered me after that, and to my great joy, everyone forgot about me. Only Alessandro and Marietta stayed with me. When I became bedridden, my former famulus looked after me, and Marietta's strange, sweet presence would sometimes break the witch's ring around me for several hours. Marietta stayed by me with touching concern, and I grew very fond of her and glad of her visits, though she never heard my mother's voice again. A rich flood of voices constantly surrounded her. She could not see, she could only hear. Bewildered souls in transitions, musing souls with questions, helpless souls who foresaw danger, and others who wished to give help shouted across her peculiar horizon. How hopeless was the task of that small window in the wall of the other world to enlighten the sleepwalkers of the flesh. Nobody bothered to look through it. They turned their heads, deaf and blind to the sobs, pleas, and warnings of their departed loved ones who called after them continually. Everybody thought Marietta was crazy. Alessandro was the only one who guessed that she had been chosen, and he dared not tell anyone for fear she would be tried for witchcraft. So he diligently spread the story that she was hopelessly crazy and kept her away from people as much as he could. He was not afraid for me to know the truth anymore, and he was happy that his lonely, ridiculed child had found someone who understood and respected her strange talent. I witnessed some strange and bizarre dialogues through Marietta. As she listened to her voices, she sometimes spelled out words in exotic languages I didn't understand. Sometimes she transmitted the evil railings of my own astral beings. This disturbed her. "But they are bad. They are torturing you, Signor Burrus. Why don't you chase them away?" I confessed bitterly that I had no power over them and begged her to help me. Maybe she could hear a voice that would help me? But I got no answer to my request. Where would it have come from? Outside? I couldn't learn anything else about my predicament from outside. Amadeus Bar had already told me everything. Still, with Marietta's help, I hoped to receive the secret of transmutation by an act of grace. Homunculus's efforts on the physical level had disappointed me, and now, despite all my gratitude and love for her, Marietta proved a disappointment also. She did open the way to the long series of experiments I later performed in the dangerous astral kingdom of presentiments, premonitions, visions, and prophecies. Without a doubt, she inoculated me with hope and curiosity about a new possibility. I took this with me when Francesco Borri's strange life finally ended after a few weeks in bed. I had spent 79 years in that body, and it was a blessing to get rid of it. I left my money and the jewels Frederick III had given me to Alessandro and Marietta. I know they mourned me bitterly. They were timid, sweet island dwellers cut off from the sea of humanity by their very differences. Those who are called, when destiny brings them together, recognize and greet one another as brothers. And it was as such that Marietta and Alessandro mourned me. Before I finally left the shadow of the Castel Sant'Angelo, I spent a little time at the tiny signal light of Marietta's open soul. Desperate, bodiless entities who wanted to call back to their loved ones or enemies thronged around her quiet and open refuge. But now she was calling me, summoning me with a tender spiritual desire, calling me by my own name, not my earthly name, but the one that is mine alone of all living beings. I do not know how she learned this mystery, but she knew it at the time of my death. She had acquired power over the inner core of my soul and was exerting an irresistible attraction over me. She didn't want to detain me long, just to have a short farewell before I went on my way. God only reveals His secrets to those who do not abuse them. So that's the end of chapter 18 and the end of book 1, the Prima Materia. And next time we will start the second book, Crucible in the Fire. Og senere, når dine øyne åpnes, og dagen skjenker av sitt lys til deg, vær da ikke redd mens du våker, for dagen din venn, og jeg lover, når den over, vil jeg våke ved din side, og vokte deg igjen.